A few years ago, I would have mocked the title of this video. Disproves God? Pfft, there is nothing in the universe that proves God's existence more than our bodies. From its built-in moral compass that is our conscience, to the astonishing ingenuity of a simple cell, to the most complex thing in the entire universe, our brains. Along with billions of Jews, Christians and Muslims, I firmly believed that the almighty Abrahamic God created us in his image as the perfect pinnacle of his earthly creation. Now today, believers will tell you that unlike our original ancestors Adam and Eve, we are far from perfect. We suffer from illness, disease and death. However, there is one thing that believers cannot say has changed, and that is our basic anatomical design. Research a picture in the literature of Adam and Eve and they will look like you and I. The purpose of this video, therefore, is to analyse 4 design features of the body of our species. Firstly, from the viewpoint of a religious apologist, and then the perspective of an evolutionary biologist. If you're a believer watching this, then you have nothing to fear, at least in theory. No matter how much we scrutinise our bodies, no matter how much someone like me knocks on the door of imperfect design or evolution, it simply won't open. Or at least it shouldn't. I should also add that originally this video was 7 ways your body disproves God, but for the sake of time I narrowed it down to my personal top 4. Therefore, just missing out on that top 4 was the recurrent laryngeal nerve, the lanugo hair of fetuses, and humans that are born with an atavistic tail. Without further ado, let's get straight in to number 4. Have you ever wondered, why is it that if I don't take in enough vitamin C, I would die? But if my dog Sparrow doesn't take in any vitamin C whatsoever, he lives? Biologist Jerry A. Coyne describes the human genome as a graveyard of dead genes. Out of the 30,000 genes that we possess, approximately 2,000 of those are inactive, non-functional pseudogenes. To put that staggering number into context, if the total number of your genes was reflected in world population, then the population of the entire continent of North America would be pseudogenes. But let's home in on just one of those genes. A gene which is active and functional in my dog Sparrow, but is non-functional and inactive in myself. And that is the gene GLO, used by the majority of mammal species to convert and synthesize vitamin C from glucose. What's especially interesting about this synthesis is that thanks to DNA sequencing, we recognise that there are 4 key steps involved, and that our body possesses all of the genetic information necessary to make it happen. But that this final step doesn't occur thanks to GLO being inactive and mutated. How would a religious apologist address this weird, perplexing issue? Well, they would say, clearly, as our body possesses all of the genetic information necessary to fulfill these 4 steps, God designed our bodies with the capacity to synthesize vitamin C from glucose. But since our fall into imperfection, our bodies must have mutated so that this isn't working properly. For a believer, that might sound like a satisfying and coherent answer. It certainly would have satisfied my curiosity if I needed the answer to be true. But when you dig a little deeper into this topic, certain inexplainable, uncomfortable facts begin to surface. It turns out we are not the only mammal species with this particular genetic inability. This pseudogene is also present in every other primate species. Is that just a coincidence? If the pseudogene was present in 99% of all mammal species, then yes, it could be. But excluding primates, this pseudogene is only present in fruit bats and guinea pigs. And so the real question then becomes, from an evolutionary perspective, is that a coincidence? Well, what do fruit bats and guinea pigs both have in common? They both obtain a large amount of vitamin C from their natural diet. Therefore, if and when in the animal's history their GLO gene became inactive by mutation, it was completely inconsequential as to their survival. The same is also true of the ancestor of all modern primates who lived approximately 40 million years ago. Little did that pesky prehistoric primate know as it was stuffing its face with delectable fruit, that this mutation, this gene inactivation, would result in the loss of millions and millions of its distant descendants' lives from scurvy. I would also add as a small footnote that when scientists analyse our GLO gene, the DNA sequence, and they compare that to other primates, ours by far most closely resembles that of chimpanzees and bonobos, rather than distant relatives like orangutans. This is exactly what we would expect if evolutionary theory was true. I know as soon as the topic of childbirth is raised, believers will say, well, Harrison, hold on, you used to be a Jehovah's Witness. You know exactly why childbirth is the way it is today. God told Eve after she disobeyed him in Genesis 3:16, I will greatly increase the pain of your pregnancy. In pain, you will give birth to children. If I was a believer, I would not want to be highlighting that verse. I'd be getting a rubber out and trying to erase it from the Bible. Because from my perspective, that verse stands as the most underrated evil act of God in the scriptures. Yes, he sentenced a man to death for picking up sticks on the wrong day of the week. Yes, he sent 2 she-bears to maul 42 children to death. But to punish billions of women for the mistake of one distant ancestor? A punishment which is unimaginably traumatic, painful, has resulted in mass bloodshed, death, and family heartbreak, is beyond cruel. It is malevolent and inexcusable. If you're a believer, allow yourself to remove the rose-tinted glasses from which you read the Genesis creation accounts. Ask yourself this: is the story of God punishing Eve for eating a piece of fruit by creating this horrific childbirth factually and historically true? Or is it a poor attempt at harmonising the historical horror of childbirth with the God who apparently designed it? Could there be a more rational, evidence-based explanation as to why childbirth for our species is so painful? Well, this time when comparing and contrasting our species with that of other primates, scientists don't find that same eerie similarity, but quite significant disparity. Chimpanzees and bonobos, for example, give birth in relatively little pain. So why is it so excruciatingly painful for so many among our species? 2 reasons. Firstly, unlike other species, our newborns have disproportionately large heads and brains. At birth, the circumference is approximately 35 centimetres. And second, we are fully bipedal. To allow for efficient walking, our hips, pelvises must remain relatively narrow. What's the end result? Well, my mum, for example, almost died while giving birth to my older brother Jonathan. She split and suffered huge blood loss. Could you imagine if God in his design studio, instead of designing the female reproductive tract to exit through the pelvis, instead designed it to exit through the lower abdomen? Imagine the amount of lives that would have saved. We don't have to imagine. Instead of risking death when she was pregnant with and carrying me, she decided straight away with no second thought and hesitation, tell the doctors I want a cesarean. It was successful, it was quick, she was out of there in a very short space of time, and she said when compared to delivering my brother, it was a walk in the park, it was a breeze. But it does make you wonder though, if humans have figured this out, why couldn't God? While believers may credit God as being the designer of childbirth, in fact labelling childbirth a miracle, saying that this demonstrates more than anything else the skilled craftsmanship and his ingenuity. I would argue that if you are going to credit that God with designing childbirth, you also have to credit that loving, caring, empathetic God with kidney stones. Have you ever heard someone say, well, God works in mysterious ways? If that's true, then even I am struggling to figure out the mystery that is designing a body part that has no obvious function, which can even prove to have severe complications and fatalities, and then claiming that that design and all of your design is perfect. A believer will say, well, hold on. No obvious function. Firstly, Harrison, it is the height of human pride and arrogance to say that just because we don't currently know what the purpose is of this or that, it disproves God. God created everything with a purpose in mind. Just because we don't know what it is yet does not mean that it disproves the Creator. And second, some scientists actually say that there are small patches of tissues inside the appendix which aid in assisting our immune system. Is it true that the appendix is beneficial? I wouldn't say beneficial. I would say maybe neutral or detrimental. Why? Well, if you remove the appendix, there's no negative side effects. It does not decrease the longevity of your life. In fact, it increases your chances of survival. Survival from what? Appendicitis. Due to the narrowness of the human appendix, it can become easily clogged, inflamed, infected, and a ruptured appendix can kill you. You might be thinking, Harrison, come on, you're being a tad dramatic there. Can kill you? I don't know anyone who has died of appendicitis. And you probably don't, because you're living today in an age of modern science, discovery, surgery, medicine. We can treat these things far better than at any point in history. Today there is still a 1 in 15 chance that you will get appendicitis at some point in your lifetime. Then when you have it, there's a 1% chance that you die from it. But before surgical removal, there was a 20% chance of death from an inflamed appendix. In other words, 1% of the population were born to die from appendicitis. That is a staggering method of natural selection. Therefore, regardless of whether you believe that there's a microscopic benefit to the appendix or not, if you believe that God designed it, you also have to acknowledge that it is shockingly poor in design and function. Is there a more rational, evidence-based explanation as to why our appendix is so small in size and has no apparent function? In other animals, especially herbivores, the appendix is a long, enlarged pouch which acts like a fermenting vessel, similar to the extra stomachs that cows possess. It's a place where fibre can break down into short-chain fatty acids over time. Now, what we should expect if the theory of evolution is true is that among primates who vary in diet, there should be a direct correlation between relatively recent evolutionary historical diet and the size and usefulness of the animal's appendix. But is that what we find? Starting at this end of the scale with herbivorous primates such as lemurs, lorises and spider monkeys, you see that the appendix is long, it is useful and it functions properly. In the primate middle ground of orangutans and macaques and other species like that, where they don't naturally obtain as many leaves in their diet, it is reduced in size. And then on this end of the spectrum, humans, Homo sapiens, the appendix has almost completely vanished. You may be wondering, well, that's strange because I eat quite a lot of leafy greens and fibre in my diet, so surely it's important to have a functioning large appendix. That might be you, but your ancestors over the last couple of million years beg to differ. You will never find a cave painting of a salad. Your ancestors over the last couple of million years were on the hunt for the most nutrient-rich, calorie-dense food that will enable their survival and potentially to thrive and reproduce. They were not after fibre and vegetation. They were after meat and animal products. There was no close second. In fact, our bodies don't possess the enzymes needed to break down cellulose. That tiny vestigial pouch known as our appendix stands as a testifying feature to our shared common ancestry and our evolutionary history. Imagine that you are God's assistant in heaven. You've watched him create every other animal species except mankind. And this is where you come in. He's informed you of his mission. He wants to create a species, a man and a woman to start off with, who have a natural proclivity towards lifelong pair bonding in a monogamous relationship. They need to stay together exclusively for life. In order for this to take place, you need to fully match the desire, the need for intimacy and procreation between both parties. Hypothetically, let's say, unlike the biblical account, God starts off by creating woman first. He designs her body to ovulate 1 egg per month, to have a gestation period of 9 months, and then to have to look after a baby that can't look after itself for many years. Good idea? Yes, definitely, because it's God and God's the boss and he's always right. He then passes you the paper, his heavenly notepad and a pen, and he asks you to design the perfect partner, the man. Where do you begin? Personally, with God's mission at the forefront of my mind and that need to impress my boss, I would write down that the man's body, the man's desire and need for intimacy must be fully synchronized and harmonized with that of the woman. No matter what time, no matter what stage in life, pregnant, not pregnant, just given birth, years after childbirth, if they're both completely harmonized and synchronized, then they'll be compatible. There'll be no imbalance whatsoever. I would also add that as God is creating the man and the woman to be perfect and putting them apparently in a nice garden, the man wouldn't need very many gametes. Surely if the woman is ovulating 1 egg a month, then the man can produce 1 perfect little tadpole per month to fertilise the egg as well. Does that sound reasonable and wise? I think so. I honestly think that that would be the best approach possible to accomplish and fulfill God's mission for humanity. But is that what God did? As almost 80% of the viewers who watch my channel are male, you would all know that if that was a true story, God decided to take my note and tear it up into 1,000 pieces and toss it out of heaven down to earth. God is adamant that his plan is far superior. God designs a man's body with an insatiable appetite for physical pleasure, and he combines that with a mentality that craves novelty and new experience. Instead of 1 perfect gamete being produced a month to satisfy 1 perfect woman who's ovulating 1 egg a month, he designs the man's body with a mechanism to continually, endlessly produce an unlimited supply of gametes, of his perfect little tadpoles. Enough to satisfy, to impregnate countless women. His plan is to put that man inside a garden on earth where he will be eventually surrounded by countless unclothed, perfect female bodies. And then finally, he tells the man in that species that if they have intimate relations with anyone other than their monogamous lifelong pair bonded partner, they will be put to death. I mean, you literally cannot make this up. You can. A believer will be quick to say, don't get carried away, Harrison, with that line of reasoning. I can show you how false you are, okay? Look at the evidence. Most of the men on this planet have 1 partner, 1 wife. Clearly, that is evidence enough to tell you that we have this natural disposition installed within us in the beginning by God for monogamous pair bonding. I would counter that by saying, if that is true, if that indeed is how God originally created us, and we are only 6,000 years from that, Why do all of us have this inextinguishable desire to impregnate the world? Why is immorality of an intimate nature the most prevalent sin in any church? Why did Old Testament patriarchs and kings, despite knowing God's original plan for mankind, despite knowing that God created Adam and Eve to be with each other forever, take up to 1,000 wives and concubines for themselves, to satisfy their physical desire and need at any time, at the click of the fingers, all day, every day? And why is it that if your religion suddenly changed and shifted focus away from monogamy and taught that your holy sacred text did indeed teach polygamy, I would be asking you not, is that something you consider, but how many wives would you take for yourself? Clearly there is a war between what you have been told to be true and what your body is yelling at you regarding reality. There is a name for this war: cognitive dissonance. And located within this particular cognitive dissonance is one of the most discouraging aspects of religious belief: the perpetuated narrative that you are not an animal. That regardless of your physical conduct, purely for improper thoughts which God can see, you are a debased, degenerate sinner that is worthy of punishment. This leads to unimaginable fear, guilt, and feelings of worthlessness. The only way that God's mission when creating mankind and his actual created products in man and woman make any sense is if we completely radically shift our perspective from that God being a God of love, kindness, mercy, compassion, and empathy to an inhumane, cruel torturer who revels in seeing us fail to live up to his impossible standards. Putting religious belief to one side for a second, all of us can unitedly agree that there is a disparate contrast in terms of reproductive investment between a male and a female. With regards to a female, they produce one nutrient-rich, expensive egg per month. A male has a limitless supply of cheap, expendable gametes. If he mates with multiple partners multiple times in a short period, it exponentially increases his chances of fathering the next generation, of passing on his genetics. In 90% of mammal species, it is the female who does 100% of the parenting. The male's only involvement is his gametes during reproduction. Is it any surprise then that there exists a saying, men cuddle who they can, women cuddle who they choose? From an evolutionary perspective, that's not surprising in the slightest, as selection favours men who are promiscuous and women who are picky. To a man, a female's status in terms of power and authority, dominance within a group, is of little to no concern. The question is she available? But to a woman, regardless of what we want to tell ourselves, inherently there is a draw to the alpha male of the group. Why is that? Because in many other primate species, it is the alpha male, the most powerful, vigorous champion, that impregnates a large number, if not all, of the females in the selection pool. In turn, those females benefit in multiple ways. Not only does their child possess the genetics of the strongest and most powerful male, dramatically increasing its chances of survival, but the female and the offspring benefit from the security, stability, and protection of the alpha as long as he is top dog, top G, top gorilla. Perhaps you are a believer who is about to write a comment saying that you believe in Jesus and evolution. You identify as more of a liberal, progressive believer. You worship God and also believe that God created evolution, which is an oxymoron if I've ever heard one. If that is the case, then I have to ask you, which God created evolution? The insurmountable problem, if you're a Jew, a Christian, or a Muslim, is that your sacred holy texts explicitly reveal how your God created the earth and everything upon it, according to their kinds, starting with Adam and Eve in terms of our species, approximately 6,000 years ago. Just because a widely accepted scientific theory contradicts the introductory pages of your holy book does not mean that you can go through your holy book and any disproven parts just change and write underneath metaphorical, figurative. I had enough of that with the Noah's Ark video. If you believe in Jesus based on the Gospels, and yet disregard the story of Adam and Eve in early Genesis as figurative, metaphorical, non-literal, how do you explain the literal genealogy of Jesus in Luke chapter 3, which starts with Adam? Carl Sagan famously stated that skeptical scrutiny is the means in both science and religion by which deep thoughts can be winnowed from deep nonsense. For many millennia, the majority of our species have attributed the apparent design found in nature to a specific god or gods, Marduk, Al, Ra, Yahweh, or another god. But they got its name wrong. It's evolution, primarily by mutation and natural selection, a process which gives the illusion of design. The concept of a supernatural creative force, therefore, who instantaneously spoke our species into existence, has been demoted from, at one time, a deep thought to what it is now, deep nonsense. For when we remove the veil from our species, we do not find the perfect design of a perfect God, but imperfect design, the hallmark of evolution. As opposed to being the single greatest evidence of a supernatural genius, our bodies are walking, talking windows into our evolutionary past. I want to thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you're not only subscribed to the channel, but that you have the notification bell turned on so that you never miss an upload. If you share my passion and my desire to help wake others up from their religious indoctrination, don't underestimate the power of giving this video a thumbs up, a like, and leaving a comment. That way, hopefully, it will reach as many believers as possible.